Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Brown, and I'm the Manager of Development for the City of Toledo. Thank you for joining us for today's discussion on the Vibrancy Initiative grant programs. The City of Toledo first launched the Vibrancy Initiative back in 2021, and this was really our strategic approach to revitalizing commercial corridors in our city. The initiative was born from talking to local business and property owners about obstacles they faced when renovating historic and commercial buildings throughout our city. Pretty much all of the feedback we received came back to one thing: funding. The cost of improving these buildings based on today's code exceeds potential rental income from those spaces. And so to address these obstacles, the city created the Vibrancy Initiative to help property owners renovate their buildings' exterior and make ground floor commercial space available for their building so that it can be occupied by a new tenant. The primary goals of the Vibrancy Initiative are to create jobs, reduce blight, and preserve and improve structures in our community. So when we look at projects to support, with these programs, those are the primary objectives that we're looking at. Since the program was launched in 2021, these programs have leveraged over $109 million in private sector investment, assisted over 30 existing businesses, helped attract over 20 new businesses, and helped create and retain more than 480 jobs in Toledo. We see this as the perfect opportunity for the city and the private sector to accomplish our shared goals of improving vacant corridors and activating vacant buildings in our community. We are excited today to announce that we have funding for our 7th year of the initiative, and I want to give a special thank you to Mayor Wade Kapsakavage and Toledo City Council for funding these programs. Their support really underscores the importance of these programs to our community. So I just want to give them a special thank you for believing this initiative and continuing to fund it. So what is the Vibrancy Initiative? Really, it's a collection of 4 different grant programs that are really aimed at creating jobs, reducing blight, and preserving and improving structures in our community, as I mentioned. I'm going to go through each of these 4 programs, kind of do a deep dive into what the criteria is, what the guidelines are, and then we're going to look into the actual applications and show you how you can submit an application for any one of these programs. Our Vibrancy Initiative grants are really split into 2 different sections. First is our capital grants. These grants provide dollars to do the work to renovate and improve buildings in our community. So in our capital grants, we have our facade improvement grant and our white box grant. The other category of grants we have are our planning grants, and those award funds specifically to create the plans and prepare space to then move forward with those improvement projects. So again, first is our facade improvement grant. This grant helps building owners transform a building's facade. It reimburses 50 to 75% of eligible expenses. And this is a change to our facade improvement grant program from last year, where as to last year, it was just a flat 50% reimbursement, but this year it is 75% reimbursement for those projects that are located in one of our NRSAs. NRSA stands for Neighborhood Revitalization Strategic Area. We have 3 in the city of Toledo. One is the Old South End. We also have the Inglewood NRSA, as well as the Junction NRSA. So if your building is located in any one of those, you're eligible for up to 75%. You're eligible for 75% of eligible expenses to reimbursed up to $40,000, which is the maximum amount that this grant can award. The minimum amount is $10,000. The second grant is our White Box grant, and this program helps bring vacant first floor commercial spaces up to current code. It reimburses 75 to 90% of eligible interior renovation expenses. And again, 75% is for any building that's not located in one of our NERSAs, and 90% would apply to a building that's located in one of our three NERSAs in Toledo. The White Box Grant awards grants of $25,000 to $75,000. For a project to be eligible for either of these grants, it must be complete by December 1st of 2025. So essentially, after we announce the awardees for these projects, you'll have almost the rest of the calendar year to complete the project, and the project must be totally complete with all documentation submitted, permits received, final inspections complete by December 1st, 2025. At that time, upon completion of the project, all documents that show to us that the project is complete, including photos of the completed work, those permits, if any were required for the project, as well as invoices indicating the cost of the project, must be sent in to me by December 1st, 2025, in order to be eligible to receive that funding. Specifically for our White Box grant, eligible projects must comprehensively address necessary code upgrades and result in a certificate of occupancy or a certificate of completion. So essentially, with the White Box grant, it needs to be a complete white box renovation project where at the end of it, the space is ready to be inhabited by a new business. So it must be completely up to code. It can't just be a partial code improvement project. It has to comprehensively address those code deficiencies in order to result in that certificate of occupancy or completion. Eligible applicants for these programs include businesses, individuals, and nonprofit organizations. All applicants must be in good standing with governmental entities, meaning that they're current on taxes, utilities, fees, and have no other active code violation citations. One thing to note here is that in our NOFA, as well as on the webpage for each of these programs, I've listed out a number of contacts so that you can check to see if you, as an applicant, or your building that you're applying for, is in good standing with governmental entities, including City of Toledo tax, utilities, as well as the auditor's office, the Lucas County Auditor. Specifically, checking with the auditor would specifically be for property tax, making sure that you're current on property taxes. And one thing I'll note there is that I recommend, if you're reaching out to the auditor's office, check to make sure that all of the properties that you own are current on property taxes, because that's a check that we do on our end. Additionally, to be eligible as an applicant, you must own the building for which you're applying. However, if you don't currently own the building, but it's under contract, you're still eligible to apply, but you must own the building by the time the construction phase starts. Eligible buildings for both of these programs must be located in the city of Toledo, have a commercial, industrial, or mixed use, and have no active code violation citations. And here's a change that we have this year compared to previous years. Buildings may only receive one Vibrancy Initiative grant per year. This is a change that we made in order to spread the funding around, so one project wasn't utilizing a large portion of the funds that we have available for our Vibrancy Initiative. So again, a building may only receive one Vibrancy Initiative grant per year. In addition to that, for our facade improvement grant specifically, any one building is only eligible for one facade grant in its lifetime. And for the White Box grant, any one individual commercial space is eligible for only one White Box grant in its lifetime. In terms of ineligible buildings, any building that's exclusively single family or multifamily residential use or exclusively storage use is not eligible. Also, buildings that contain payday loan businesses, pawn shops, firearms, or other weapons dealers, adult entertainment, or again, self-storage are not eligible to receive either of these grants. In terms of occupancy requirements for both the facade and white box grants, um, the facade improvement grant the building must contain a first floor commercial or industrial business or have a committed first floor tenant. So essentially, either there's a building already operating out of that space or there's a committed tenant for that space. If you just have a committed tenant, rather than an already occupying business, that can be shown with a letter of intent, and I will demonstrate where you can submit that in the application. For the white box grant, the building must contain a vacant first floor commercial space. So it's really the opposite from the facade grant, whereas the facade grant, the building must be occupied. For the white box grant, the space must be vacant. Really, the goal of this program is to address chronically vacant buildings and spaces in our community and help bring them up to code so that a tenant can occupy those spaces. So really, that's a key tenet of the program. So um, a building can only be eligible if they have that vacancy. All occupying businesses must be registered with the City of Toledo as well. In terms of eligible expenses for these grants, all upgrades must comply with zoning and building codes, and any expense incurred prior to receiving signature on the grant agreement is not eligible for reimbursement. So with both of these programs, it's important to note that you're not eligible if the project's already been completed or is already significantly underway. Any expense incurred before that agreement is signed is not eligible for reimbursement. Here's a list of eligible expenses for the facade improvement grant. You can see some of the eligible expenses include things like building facing materials, windows, really anything that's going to renovate that facade. And I'll just clarify here what a facade is exactly. A facade is really the primary entrance to a building that's facing a public street. So a building, if it's on a corner, could have more than one facade that's eligible for reimbursement for improvements made to it if it's on a corner. So if it's a corner building, it could have two facades that are eligible for reimbursement. Otherwise, it would just be the one street-facing front of the building that we will reimburse for improvements. So again, some of those improvements are things like windows, doors, gutters and downspouts, stairs, ramps, sidewalks on private property, things like that. One thing that I will note here is that with exterior painting, I highly recommend looking at the city's acceptable paint color standards. And I've got a link here as well as in the NOFA and on the web pages that just kind of outlines what colors might be acceptable. I'll also note that roofing expenses are non-reimbursable expenses, so we will not reimburse those expenses directly. However, they can count toward an applicant's match. So say you have you were awarded a $40,000 facade improvement grant. The project's $80,000 in total or greater. $40,000, for the match portion that's coming from the applicant, which might be the, second half of that $40,000, that can count towards the match. And then you must also have at least two eligible expenses from this list. And we would directly reimburse for those, but not directly reimburse for the roofing expense. That's another important item to mention here is that eligible projects must contain at least two of these eligible expenses. Okay, and in terms of eligible expenses for the white box grant, those expenses must address deficiencies in complying with building code, fire code, or accessibility requirements. We've got a detailed, I've got a detailed list on the next page of what exactly that includes. But again, the goal of this is to bring the space entirely up to code so that it can receive that certificate of occupancy. So, things like HVAC, electrical improvements, accessibility improvements, those things are eligible for reimbursement through this grant. Any deficiencies in complying with code must be demonstrated by stamped architectural or engineering drawings. That's a requirement of this grant. You have to upload those with your application in order to be eligible, and that is not true of the facade improvement grant. So here's a list of the eligible building code improvements. Again, you can find this in the NOFA or on the webpage for the White Box grant. You can see things, again, like HVAC, electrical, fire suppression. Any of these items could be eligible for reimbursement. Okay, next I'm going to get into our evaluation criteria, starting with the facade improvement grant. I'll first give a little bit of background on how our process works. Essentially, after we receive these applications, we first do an internal review to make sure that the project is eligible to receive the grant. And then eventually we hand it over to our incentive advisory committee, which is an independent committee made up of 8 citizens from the community who are in various different, financial fields. And essentially they review these applications and then score them accordingly. The first evaluation criteria that we have here is transformational facade improvement. So essentially, when our incentive advisory committee is reviewing this, they're looking to see that the improvements to the facade are comprehensive and have a significant impact on the aesthetics of the building and the surrounding area. Has a rating from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. Has a weight of 3 for a maximum score of 15. And this is just a list of some ways that you could demonstrate the how this facade improvement project is transformational. So you might demonstrate a well thought out vision for the facade improvements and how they're comprehensive. You could include photographs or reports demonstrating the current state of the building and the surrounding area. Got a number of different options here, including identify how the improved facade will catalyze development and benefit the surrounding area. Again, these are really ideas for you to state your case to the committee as to why this project will be so transformational for not just that building, but also the surrounding area. So I recommend really kind of going through each of these, identifying which might be able to state the best case for your project or your building, and then really stating that case in the application. And as we go through the application, I'll point out where you can specifically state your case for any one of these, as well as where you can upload documents that help kind of paint the picture as to how impactful your project will be. Next, in terms of evaluation criteria, we have historic preservation. It's really important to us to preserve the oldest structures in our community. We think that they bring a lot of character to the city, and we really want to see them in productive use. So essentially, the scoring here is just based on the year that it was built. So we'll take a look. We'll look up the records as to when the building was built and then assign it a score accordingly. So you can see here, if it was built after 1970, no points will be awarded. But then if we go down and the building was built prior to 1910, it could receive 4 to 5 points. That's on a weight of 2 for a max score of 10. And then this is a new evaluation criteria for this year. If you've received a planning grant in previous years for that building, specifically a facade improvement planning grant, then a score of 5 will be awarded to the project, weighted at 2 for a maximum score of 10. We had our pilot program for our planning grants last year. There was one facade improvement planning grant recipient and one white box planning grant recipient. So this will really only apply to one applicant if they choose to apply. Neighborhood revitalization strategy area. We talked about nurses earlier. If your building is located in a NERSA, an additional score of 5 will be added to your maximum score. And lastly, if your building's located in an LMI census tract, LMI stands for low to moderate income census tract, score of 5 will be added. And the maximum possible score for an application is 45 points. Okay, next we have our white box grant evaluation criteria. The first criteria for this is project impact. It's pretty similar to our facade improvement grant criteria. This is really where you're stating your case for the impact that this project will have. Maybe that's how long the space has been vacant, or the state of disrepair that it's in, or how much it will benefit the surrounding corridor or community. Really stating that case as to why this project deserves to be funded over other applicants. This has a maximum score of 15. And then next we have improved building safety or accessibility. This is really an assessment as to how much your proposed project is going to improve that building safety or accessibility. This is a criteria piece that we go through with a representative from our Department of Building Inspection, where we're assessing, specifically how many of these different items are being improved and how much that is relating to the overall improvement of safety or accessibility. So let's go through these. Let's see. So a 0 score would be no improvements, which really wouldn't apply. A score of 2 would be awarded if fire or accessibility are moderately improved. 3 would be awarded if fire or accessibility are significantly improved. And 4, fire and accessibility are moderately improved. Lastly, 5, fire, safety, and accessibility are both significantly improved. That has a maximum score of 10. Okay, the next criteria is historic preservation. So we already talked about that with the facade improvement grant. It's really the same criteria piece here. This has a maximum score of 10. And then also, as we talked about with the facade improvement grant, if it's located in a NERSA, was a planning grant recipient, or is located in an LMI census tract, it'll be awarded additional points. And then this is different from what we talked about with the FIG program. For the white box grant, if there is a committed tenant, a score of 5 will be awarded to applications that include a signed letter of intent. All right, next we will dive into our planning grants. As I discussed earlier, these grants are really aimed at feasibility study and providing plans for these projects to move forward. So it's really a phase before the facade or white box grant is at. We see this as really a way to generate a pipeline for our facade and white box grant, as well as to assist building owners with the capabilities to move forward with these projects. We place a big emphasis on working with those building owners who have, maybe not been through this process before. They're first-time developers, or maybe they're relatively new to the field of development. So we essentially partner with them, work side by side through this process of obtaining the planning documents from a design firm, and then that essentially equips them with the ability to apply for one of these facade or white box grants in the following year. So first we have our facade improvement planning grant. Provides funds to conduct a facade condition assessment and conceptual design services. This is an important thing to note. To be eligible for this grant, the building must be located in a city-designated NERSA or a qualified low to moderate income census tract in the city of Toledo. They must also be occupied by a business and have no active code violation citations. So again, for a building to be eligible, it must be located in a NERSA or in an LMI census tract in the city of Toledo. That's a change from last year. It was previously just those buildings located in nurses were eligible. We've expanded that so that it also applies to LMI census tract located buildings. And again, must be occupied by a business and have no active code violation citations. This is a list of the deliverables of the Facade Improvement Grant Program. You can expect to receive a comprehensive facade condition assessment, conceptual rendering, and construction estimate. So essentially, once the work is complete, again, you'll have a roadmap as to how to complete this work. And essentially, if the awardee planned to apply for a facade improvement grant in the following year, all of this could just be submitted as part of their application, and they'd be ready to go. This is the scoring criteria for the facade improvement planning grant. The first item is project need. So essentially, we are looking for demonstration of what the need is for this project to happen. So we state that the applicant convincingly demonstrated the necessity of conducting a feasibility study for the redevelopment of the space. There's a rating scale of 1 to 5, and these are some examples of how you could demonstrate that need. Might be through photographs or reports, evidence of structural issues or safety hazards, documentation on how current facade might not meet modern accessibility standards, testimonials or letters from neighboring businesses, documentation of the building's historical significance, or examples of how other historical buildings in the area have undergone successful facade revitalizations, and maybe that's part of, a complete redevelopment of that corridor. There's a lot of different ways that you can take some of these. So I recommend, again, just doing kind of a deep assessment as to how you can best state your case to the committee. This has a maximum score of 15, and there's only 2 evaluation criteria for this program. The second is historic preservation, and that's the same as with White Box and Facade Grant, as a maximum score of 10, and the maximum possible score is 25. So lastly, we have the White Box Planning Grant, which similarly, it provides funding to conduct a feasibility study, but on that vacant first floor commercial space. And same with the Facade Improvement Planning Grant, eligible buildings must be in a NERSA or LMI census tract. This is actually incorrect here in the slide. It must be vacant, just like with the White Box Grant, and have no active code violation citations. So it needs to be a vacant space located in a NERSA or LMI census tract in order to be eligible. Deliverables include a comprehensive code assessment for the building, floor plans, and a construction cost estimate. So that construction cost estimate for both of these programs will really it'll contain a comprehensive scope of work. So again, it will really outline not just the cost of the project, but a detailed description of what exactly needs to be done in order to bring that space up to code. Here's the evaluation criteria for the White Box Planning Grant. It's really similar, you'll notice, to the Facade Improvement Planning Grant. It's really about demonstrating project need and historic preservation. And it too has a maximum possible score of 25. Next, we'll take a look at our timeline for these programs. Here we have our milestones and dates. Application opens. The applications for all of these programs opened last Wednesday, January 29th. And today we are hosting this webinar. This is a new event from last year. We are introducing office hours. So we're going to have a one-time office hours this week on Wednesday, February 5th. It will be located at the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library's main library branch, and will offer in-person assistance with your application or with your project. If you can't make it to those office hours, I recommend just reaching out to me. You can reach me at economicdevelopment@toledo.oh.gov, or you can give me a call. Both my email and phone number are included in the NOFA and on the web pages for all of these programs. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have throughout this process. Um, but I can also potentially refer you to one of our partners. We're lucky to have such a robust community of partners who are also dedicated to helping businesses in our community and helping to, revitalize these spaces in our community as well. So we work a lot with them, and we really rely on them a lot to assist our applicants with their applications. And they're just a really great resource. So again, stop by our office hours on Wednesday at the library, or shoot me an email and I can get you connected with somebody from one of our partner organizations. Our application submission deadline is Wednesday, March 5th at midnight, essentially. So these applications are submitted on a platform called Zoom Grants, which we'll go over here shortly. We won't accept any applications later than midnight on March 5th. On Friday, April 18th, we will announce which projects were awarded. And then from there, with those awarded projects, there's a number of steps that'll occur from then until the end of the year. First is pre-development meetings. This is only applicable to the White Box grant and White Box planning grant. Essentially, we go to the site with different representatives from the city of Toledo to review the proposed improvements and review the space as it is currently. Essentially, we're trying to determine what essentially needs to be, well, basically, we're trying to determine that the proposed improvements will bring that space up to code compliance so that it can be inhabited by a business and again receive that certificate of occupancy or certificate of completion, as that's really our metric for a white box grant being comprehensive in nature. So we have that pre-development meeting, meet on site. Those meetings will occur between April 21st and May 2nd. And then the grant agreement deadline is on Friday, May 2nd. So essentially, we need the signed agreement returned to us, as well as a restrictive covenant signed and returned to us by May 2nd. The restrictive covenant essentially just prevents sale of the property for 2 years after completion of the project without City of Toledo approval. And really that's to prevent like flipping, using these programs to just flip a property necessarily. So we require our sign off on the sale of the property. So again, both the grant agreement and restrictive covenant, we must receive them by May 2nd. After that, the project construction phase begins. So that lasts from May 5th to December 1st. And then by December 1st, the project must be complete with all documents required for reimbursement submitted to us. And then from there, we'll move into our application walkthrough. Okay, this is our Vibrancy Initiative webpage. It's really a landing page for all of these different grant programs. If you scroll down, I'll first note that after probably tomorrow, after this webinar is over, I will post a recording of the webinar here, so you can review it at any time. And again, don't hesitate to give me a call if you have any specific questions. If you scroll down a little bit here, you can see each of these programs listed out. And then from there, you can either apply now or learn more. If you click learn more, this is the individual web page for that grant program, and it contains a downloadable version of the notice of funding availability, as well as all of the information contained in it listed on this web page. I highly recommend reading through this before starting an application. So we'll go back, and to apply for one of these programs, click apply now. So again, this is Zoom grants. The application is below, but first we'll take a look up here. To start a new application, you can either log in as an existing user, or if you don't currently have an account, click New Zoom Grants Account, and you'll provide your email, password, first and last name, and click New Account, and then you'll begin your application. Give me a second while this loads. Okay, if we scroll down below, we can see the first section of four different sections, each represented by a different tab. The first section is project site and ownership information. You'll see the first question here is project name. So essentially, name the project using the street address of the building. Or if the building has a specific name, you could use that name as your project name as well. Then you will put your amount requested. The amount requested is going to be equal to 50% of your eligible expenses. Unless you're located in a NERSA, then it would be 75% of eligible expenses up to $40,000 listed here. And then some applicant information, really just name, phone, email, and then organization information. So if you click that button, there we go. Organization information, it's going to be the project site owner of record, as well as the address, the primary address for that organization, and the phone and website. Website and fax are optional, but definitely the phone number. And again, this is specifically for the applicant. So the applicant organization, where it's located, not the project specifically. We'll get into that in the next section. And then monitoring and compliance contact. This will be the person that we're interfacing with directly for the project. So their name, title, and email. And it's likely going to be the person that we would reach out to first with any questions that would be providing us with the necessary documentation. So we can scroll back up. Once you complete all of those sections, you can either hit next down here or application questions up here. Both will get you to the same place. There's a number of sections here. The first is building information. So really, we're just looking for some basic details about the building, the address, total square footage, number of tenants located in the building, a list of the tenants in the building, number of individuals employed within the building, total square footage of vacancy, and then if there is vacancy within the building, outline a marketing plan to attract tenants. Next, we get into building owner information. You must provide your tax identification number, list the individuals with an ownership interest in the building, and importantly, indicate their percentage of ownership, and then project information. So this is where you can provide a detailed overview of the improvements you intend to make to the facade of the building, and then note what the total estimated cost of those improvements is. And then if the project is part of a larger redevelopment of the building, maybe you're not just doing a facade improvement, but also interior renovations or something that just doesn't fall under a facade improvement, write about that here. And then also note how much that portion of the project will cost separately. I'll note here that in the scoring criteria for the facade improvement grant, the first piece of scoring criteria is transformational facade improvement. This is really the first place where you can kind of state your case for how transformational that project is. So whether it's, describing how comprehensive your improvements are to the facade here, as well as, what that project's leveraging in addition, whether that's, again, interior renovations or just something that's not facade related. In both of these spaces, you can really state that case for how transformational this project's going to be. And that continues in question 14, which states, explain how the proposed improvements are comprehensive in nature and how they will have a significant impact on the aesthetics of the building and the surrounding area, and how the project will result in transformational facade improvement. So as to where these questions above in 10 and 12, you're really listing or giving an overview of those improvements. This is kind of detailing, um, it's really getting more into the narrative form of how these improvements are comprehensive and how they'll have a significant impact. So again, really stating that case for the transformational facade improvement portion of the scoring criteria. Question 15 asks, provide a detailed timeline for the project that demonstrates the applicant's ability to complete the project by December 1st, 2025. If you'll remember, that is, it's required that the projects be complete by that date in order to be eligible for this grant. So we really just want to see a timeline to show that you thought out how you're going to do that and accomplish that. Question 16 asks, which of the following describes the majority building ownership? This in no way has any effect on our scoring. It's really just for our records. And then question 17, applicant certifies the following by initialing. Essentially, you're stating that you or the applying organization are in good standing with governmental entities, that contractors have required licensing, and that all work will be performed according to the applicable codes. Once that's complete, again, you can hit next or go up to these tabs and click budget. In the budget tab, we have two sections. First is expenses, and the second section is funding sources. You'll see in the expenses here, this is really just a list of all of the eligible expenses for the program. All you need to do is to tally up how much, how much any of these expenses, how much you're going to spend on any of these expenses for your project, and then put that amount here. Do that for each of these that you'll be improving as part of the project, and it will tally up a total here at the bottom. So again, I recommend looking at this number of the amount of eligible expenses, and then using that back in the first tab where you're putting in the amount requested. So again, that's either going to be 50% or 75% of this number, depending on where your building's located. And then I also recommend cross-referencing this number in terms of funding sources. In this section, you're going to be writing out what your sources of funding are. Maybe that's maybe it's a personal account or funds from your business. Maybe it also includes a loan, another grant from a different entity. Whatever your capital stack might be, list that out here as well as the amounts, and it will provide a total for your funding sources. It's imperative that you demonstrate to us that your funding sources are adequate to cover the proposed project. So this amount in funding sources must be equal to or greater than your expenses. And then lastly, we have the documents tab. A lot of documents here. I'll go over them and indicate which are required. So we need a copy of commercial building insurance policy, as well as an applicant's W-9. You can see here that there's a downloadable template if you don't have that available. Funding sources. So this really goes with that funding sources table that we looked at. You can demonstrate adequate funding sources through commitment letters from lenders or proof of funds from a financial institution. And then we have quotes. We require at least one quote from a qualified contractor for every item listed on the expense table. And I'll also mention with those quotes, it's really important that they be broken out so that we can see what specifically um, we would be reimbursing for. So we don't really like to see just a quote from a contractor that just kind of has maybe one line that says facade improvement and then a dollar amount. We really like to see that broken out so that we can determine which of those expenses are eligible for the project, eligible to be reimbursed through this program. And then current exterior photos of the building's facade. You can also include additional photos here if you'd like. Maybe, well, honestly, I'd recommend, yeah, just putting the photos of the facade here. And then we talked about earlier how it could be beneficial to include, maybe additional photos of the surrounding area, other photos that just might state your case in some way in terms of transformational facade improvement. That should probably go down in additional information. Um, so next, after photos of the facade, we have architectural and engineering drawings, renderings, elevations. These aren't specifically required for this grant, but they can be uploaded here. And I ask that they do be uploaded here if you have them. Evidence of first floor occupancy. So we have instructions up here with more details on that. But a first floor occupancy, in order to prove that there's a first floor occupancy, we will accept a tenant business lease agreement, a letter of intent from a business to occupy the space that identifies the agreed upon rental rate and term, or a statement of self-occupancy by the building owner, including the name of the business, which again must be registered with the City of Toledo. Okay, next we have the entity operating agreement. This is required for any entity applying unless it's just an individual applying. And I'll also note that, you know, I guess it's if it's an individual applying and an individual owner. So, if the building is owned by multiple people, we would need an entity operating agreement essentially for that space. And that really just authorizes the entity to enter agreements with the City of Toledo. Entity board resolution. Oh, sorry. That comes with the board resolution. So the entity board resolution authorizing authority to enter into agreements that'll be submitted with the operating agreement. And then the federal tax return can be uploaded here. And then the last two items are the business tax registration form and vendor registration form. We've got downloadable templates that you can click here and it will download. You can fill out and then upload them here. Once all of that's complete, there'll be a submission button here at the bottom that you can click. And if anything has been missed, it will give you an error message stating that there is an unanswered question, and it will indicate which question has not been answered. If you get any errors where you know that question is answered, I recommend just refreshing the page or logging out, logging back in, and clicking submit again. That's worked in just about every instance that I've seen. Okay, next let's take a look at the White Box Grant Program application. I'll go through the rest of these applications quickly as they're really similar in nature, but there's just a few items that I'd like to point out. So again, we have the project site and ownership information on this first tab, where you can put the project name, amount requested, applicant information. And then we go into application questions. And this is largely the same too. Project site information, looking for the address, square footage. A couple of differences here. We do ask what the previous use of the unit was, and if the applicant will not self-occupy the unit, outline the marketing plan to attract tenants. So you can put that here. Building owner information. And then project information. So here in question 13, we're asking for a detailed overview of the project and the code upgrades you intend to make to the unit. Similarly to with the facade improvement grant, we're also asking if these improvements are part of a larger redevelopment of the building and what the associated cost is. And then here in question 17, this is really again, where you can demonstrate how transformational this project will be. So really state your case here. And again, I recommend uploading any additional exhibits or reference documents in the document section in order to state your case to the committee as to how impactful this program, or sorry, how impactful this project will be. Again, we ask for a timeline and self-certifications. This is the budget section for the white box grant. It's a little bit different. It doesn't have the preset expenses like the facade improvement grant did. So here you'll list out specific improvements. So, the first line might be HVAC. You'd mark which of these that falls under building code and then the amount. So it's important to note that you can indicate whether it's going to be improving building code, fire code, or ADA accessibility. And then the dollar amount, list out all of those expenses that you're going to be requesting reimbursement for, and it will give you that total, which again, you can use in the first tab under amount requested and must match the funding sources, which you can list here. And here's the document section, which I think is it's basically identical, except architectural engineering drawings, renderings, elevations are required to upload. As I mentioned earlier, those are a requirement. It's a requirement that you have those to be eligible for this grant. Okay, and then we'll take a look at our planning grant applications. They look a little bit different, and they're also much shorter than our white box or facade improvement grant. So again, project site and ownership information, you can put that here. We go into application questions, building information, which is largely the same. Building ownership information, and then project information. Question 11 asks, provide a detailed explanation as to why the comprehensive facade condition assessment and conceptual design services are needed and why your project should be selected. If you'll remember, the first piece of scoring criteria for the facade improvement planning grant is project need. So this is really where you're able to state the need for this project. And that continues in question 12, which states, provide a detailed explanation of how improvements to the building's facade will positively impact the surrounding area. And then lastly, we have documents. So for the facade improvement planning grant, we again need that building insurance policy, W-9, photos of the building. It's not likely that you would have drawings, but if you do have anything available, please upload it. Entity operating agreement, board resolution, business tax registration form, vendor registration form, and additional information. And lastly, we have the white box planning grant program. This application looks almost identical to the facade improvement planning grant application, with just slightly changed language, really, where it asks you to provide an explanation of why the feasibility study is needed and why your project should be selected, and to provide a detailed explanation of how the white box space in this building will positively impact the surrounding area. So again, it's really talking about need and potential project impact. And then lastly, the document section. So that concludes our walkthrough of the Vibrancy Initiative programs as well as the applications. I highly recommend that you apply to these programs if you're interested. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. I will put up my contact information on the screen so that you can reach out. in case you have any questions. And I'll also take this time to mention that in addition to these four grant programs, we have another component of our Vibrancy Initiative, which has to do with tax abatement. Essentially, our community reinvestment areas in the city of Toledo, they offer tax abatement for new construction or renovations renovations to existing buildings in our community. They can offer significant tax savings, property tax savings over the course of up to 15 years. And they can be a really powerful tool to save money on these improvement projects over an extended period of time. So I highly recommend for those in conjunction with this program. And I will also state again here that we have partners available to assist with applications. Um, if that's something that you might be interested, again, just reach out and I can connect you with those individuals. I look forward to hearing from anybody who's interested in these programs, and thank you so much for attending today.